Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, wherever you in the world, it is your Lawrence Xavier, and we are going to be doing something very different for the channel's usual brand and themes, but it is going to be about World of Darkness all the same. This might confuse some of you. Well, next to me I have two books. One's an iconic RPG and one of them's probably going to be iconic in the near future. The near dark future. You see what I did there, Chumba. Now, we have Cyberpunk, the classic role-playing game of the dark future. Cyberpunk 2020. Published and developed by Aurtakis Games. And this is the second reprint because you may know they changed and updated some of the rules, yada yada yada. And we have Cyberpunk RED, the role-playing game of the dark future. Published and developed by Aurtakis Games, which serves as the bridge between 2020 and the video game 2077 and the anime Edge Runners and the music video, the name of the song I forget the name of, and also the upcoming Sourcebook that will bring in 2077 elements, which is really exciting. But enough about, Cyberpunk in its entirety. We're going to bridge Vampire the Masquerade and Cyberpunk together. And some of you may know what I'm going to talk about now, but some of you are very confused. Well, White Wolf Publishing, who are the original developers and publishers of the World of Darkness games, so Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf, Mage, Wraith, Changeling, Hunter, Demon, Orpheus, and all the other themes that I care not to mention at this point, they released a series of magazines. It's actually how it started out at the very early beginnings, in addition to, developing their games, but the magazine came first. And we're not going to talk about the history of the magazine, because quite frankly, I don't care. But we're going to be focusing on 3 issues. Issue 36, 37, and 38. Because those 3 have sections talking about a crossover between Cyberpunk 20 and Vampire the Masquerade, 2nd edition specifically, guessing by the year that those particular magazines were put out. The World of Future Darkness, the very interesting crossover between Cyberpunk and Vampire the Masquerade. I've seen this being mentioned quite a bit. Like, you talk about Cyberpunk in a World of Darkness group, or vice versa, there's always going to be that one person that talks about, like, the weird crossover. Or people who are looking, like, for ways to spice up their games. Or you ask somebody, like, oh, how does Cyberpunk affect vampires, like that sort of thing? How would you run that in a dark future sort of setting? And there's somebody that mentions, well, there was this homebrew that mentioned, this source book that they put out that talks about it, but nobody ever seems to mention where they come from, other than it exists somewhere and just leaves people to do their own research, which, on the one hand, I'm all fine for people doing that actual research. But, at the same time, it's not particularly great from an archive sort of point of view. Like, what's the whole point of mentioning that it exists but not telling you where the source comes from? And that's where I'm going to come in, because we're going to be talking about most of these installments. Because, as I said, the 3 different magazines have 3 different installments talking about this crossover setting. And then I'm also going to leave links in the description below for you to purchase those 3 magazines if, one, you're interested in a blast from the past, with the different reviews and whatnot and other articles that are in there. But also, if you want to try and integrate Cyberpunk into your games of Vampire the Masquerade, and of course integrate Vampire the Masquerade into your games of Cyberpunk, you purchase it with those links, I get some of the money back, as I'm an affiliate at Drive-Thru-RPG and the Storyteller's Vault, which allows me to do additional content like this. If it wasn't for your support, I wouldn't have got this book, 2020, so if you want more interesting content like that, consider doing that, as well as some additional books in the description below. So what do each of these magazines cover? Well, specifically the Cyberpunk and the Vampire the Masquerade crossover, the World of Future Darkness, as it's so called. Well, the first issue is like the main bulk of the Cyberpunk Vampire crossover. It has the rules, the settings, like all the crunch and character creation stuff that you'll need, in addition to a new clan, which we will explore in full detail. The second installment, pun not intended, talks about how you actually run Chronicles of Vampire the Masquerade in Night City. It's not like a Night City extension, but like taking the things of Vampire and crossing them over with Night City, adapting and changing the themes to suit your Chronicles in a cyberpunk setting. And the third installment is not actually one that we're going to be covering here, but I'll talk about it anyway here. This has a story that you can run with your players if you want to put Kindred in Night City. And the reason why I'm not going to be talking about that is because I feel that I start talking about that in this sort of setting where I'm just like reading and like giving my like knee-jerk reaction thoughts. It's not very helpful. At least to how I do things anyway. I'd much rather give a full fat review for something like that, because I do book reviews, you know. I'll put a whole playlist up there in a corner somewhere to check out, for you to check out. So if you want me to do a review of this, like a proper review of the story thing, give me those likes and comments in the description below, and I'm going to need a lot of those to convince me to do that. And I'll, you know, make some time to do that once the 3-part installment is out. What do I mean by that? Because this is going to be a 3-part series. The first series, is part of this series, is going to be talking about, you know, the meat and potatoes, the crunch, the character creation, and how Kindred and the World of Darkness Denzians fit into Cyberpunk's Night City according to this non-canon, I should make that very clear, this is not canon, crossover. The second episode is going to be talking about, you know, this chronicle element of it, like talking about the themes and discussing about how the themes from Cyberpunk cross over with Vampire the Masquerade and vice versa. And the third series, I'm actually going to do a bit of solo roleplay where I'm going to make a character using Vampire the Masquerade, and we're going to have a bit of combat, you know, and test out these different mechanics to see how well they stand up. Because I think that just to really see how all the gears, or the cyberware, as it were, you know, works in an actual game setting. Because I have my opinions from reading it, but, you know, it's one thing to read it and have thoughts on it, but then actually to try it out. To that end, I should mention I will be using Vampire the Masquerade's 20th Anniversary Edition to do that. It's the closest to 2nd edition of Vampire. Like, there's very little modifications I'll need to make with that. 5th edition, not happening. I don't have any beef with 5th edition, it's just there are too many changes to make that work well. And also, we'll be able to see how well this will be able to hold up using a later edition of Vampire, just to see how well it stands the test of time sort of thing. So that's going to be lots of fun. So without further ado, let's chip in, Chumbers, and let's see what the first installment of this World of Future Darkness installment has to offer. And here we are, me teeny tiny up in the corner, and so we can have a proper look at this PDF here. An officially purchased one, I have to say. Not that it's particularly expensive, but I've got these legitimately so I can give you the most authentic experience here. And before we have a proper look, this does feel, by looking at it, a decent, like, Vampire the Masquerade. It looks like an official product. Like, you've got the frames round the corner, the borders rather, you've got the right font and things, that classic, you know, legacy Vampire font. The artwork's very cartoony of the period as well. Like, that's just, like, overly gruesome, but it's very appropriate as well. You know, you got the vampire head there. Clearly got some, like, cybernetic stuff going on. It all looks and feels like the World of Darkness. You've got, like, a little ad there. And I believe that's the last page. Oh, no, there's one more page. You've got some recurring artwork at the bottom. I think the artwork looks very cool. It's very appropriate of the setting as well. And we'll explore all this in good detail. And, you know, okay, so that's the last page. So it's about 7 pages, give or take. So it's not a huge installment talking about, like, the general world and setting. But then again, I don't think you want them to step over each other's toes as much. So let's have a little read through and see what we can learn. Cyberpunk and Gothic punk are a natural crossbreed. The vampire naturally slips into the mean streets of 2020 with a vengeance. There are many themes that are common in both games: humanity and the loss of it, alienation and a feeling of fighting the inevitable. This, I feel, is very true. You know, with Cyberpunk, you are, like, at the bottom and you're, like, trying to fight against the corporations, those corrupt corporations such as, like, Arasaka and Militech and Petrochem, you know, all those other major world-dominating corporations in the 2020 universe. You know, the governments there don't have much of an influence there, or at least not as much as they would like. And sometimes you have to work with them. You use their, like, weapons and their armors and things, like, so you can survive, but, you know, you'd much rather see the whole lot fucking burn down. And in the World of Darkness, you are neonates of the Camarilla or the Anarchs fighting against your suppressive elders, and how they secretly rule the world sort of thing. So I do agree with that in this same sense, how there's that cross-pollination, as they were, and also the discussion of humanity. I'd say it's different. Obviously, with Cyberpunk, the concept is that you modify and change who you are. You detract from yourself and humanity as you've got like more metal or chrome in you sort of thing. Of course, there are some other allegories that I could mention here. It's a bit yikes, that you're changing to suit yourself, to feel more you. That you could probably read between the lines of what I'm trying to say here. But it's more the things like, oh, you're just changing yourself for the sake of it so you can become a killing machine. It's that element that Cyberpunk focuses on really well. Then anyway, let's carry on. Is there really much difference between a netrunner, a pair of solos, and a medtech out to make money, and the flout, the corporation and group of anarchs attempting to destroy the establishment? The times are changing. In the old days, you only had to worry about the other kindred and the occasional ambitious witch hunter. Now, you not only have the elders and anarchs hunting you out for blood, but you also have megacorps and edge runners to worry about. With the addition of cybernetics, the humans are no longer the pushovers they've been over the centuries. Technological and advances are now being placed in the body, providing many humans with the abilities to match kindred in physical combat. Modern weaponry has reached a peak. A kindred with 5 dice and firearms at a perception of 5. By the way, if anybody has that in my game, like I'm getting them to redo their character sheet, will not stand up well to a cyberpunk with 5 dice, firearms, perception, and a smart gun link. Smart gun link, for those who don't know, basically you put a little cable in from your head or your arm or whatever into a gun, and it just improves your aiming with it. It's sort of like you're connecting with the mechanisms of the gun, so to speak. As if all this wasn't bad enough, many of the youngest anarchs were embraced with cyberware. They have not only disciplines, but also the cybernetic boots. Who wants to meet a pissed-off Bruar solo with reflex boosts, muscle and bone lace, a smart gun link, and potence, and celerity in a dark combat zone alley? Yeah, that sounds fucking broken. As particularly with how Cyberpunk 2020's combat is. That's infamously lethal, and I love it. But World of Darkness, especially with older stuff, with potence and celerity and how that works and how that adds dice to everything that you do, yeah, that's going to be game over very quickly. On the other hand, Cyber won't stop dominate, which is, very true. So it then talks about the Masquerade and society, vampire society in Cyberpunk 2020. And I'm not going to go through everything because, I want you to experience this all by yourself. There's a mention of the inner circle there and how that sort of like you crosses over and whatnot, but I think it's going to be interesting for most people to talk about what the different clans were like, or at least the clans that were introduced in 2nd edition. So let's have a look at those. The Asites, which 5th edition players will know as the Banu Hakim. The Asites have more business now than they ever had in centuries. Many possess contacts with megacorps. This is, in fact, the major source of monetary income. On the other hand, with the constant increase of terrorists between the elders and the anarchs, there is rich business to be held for elder vitae. Which I think is a very interesting turn, how they've become far more corporate, as it were. But, to survive the times, the hunter has to adapt to what the prey adapts to, I guess. The Bruar. The modern world has even more place for the rebels than the last 20th century. Iconoclasts, or however that word is pronounced, are leading street gangs and a few at the cutting edge of music. You won't find them on major labels, however. The idealists are losing support for their tactics. With the world changing so fast, the iconoclasts, or however that word's pronounced, insist there is no time to plan ahead so far. The individualists are gaining the most ground. Most of them can be found in music or street ops, although a few could be found pulling the strings on the few corps they could get into without attracting Venture or Giovanni interest. Which as a write-up, as awfully as I read that, so hopefully you're reading along with me, I do think that covers a very interesting spread of the Bruar. It doesn't just focus on the Bruar being like punk rebels, like fighting against the man sort of thing. It also touches upon their more political side and their, to a very minor extent, their philosophical means. It's touching a bit more on the lore and the setting a bit more, so it provides a bit more of a contrast there, which I kind of like. The followers of Set are rising rapidly. The clan's wares are bought and sold nearly everywhere. In fact, some pride themselves on purchasing these items or services. Many can be found dealing the latest and greatest in designer drugs, running the nastier gangs, and otherwise being frustratingly annoying, but always being behind the scenes and in the shadows. Which, this is very much the same sort of thing that the followers of Set are doing across all editions of Vampire. There's some changes in 5th edition, some very interesting ones, but this doesn't provide much of an interest to me as a storyteller or as a player to, like, what can I do differently that I'm not doing in a more grounded game of Vampire the Masquerade. Then we have the Gangrel. Travel's become more difficult in the last 30 years. Most Gangrel find nomad family to run with, occasionally the Ravnos' caravans. The Ravnos clearly having still those Romani ties, because that was something that World of Darkness was doing here. Unfortunately, they tried to gel them with those sorts of families, which is... I don't need to go into that, but they did not do that particularly well. If they run with a human pack, they don't do it for so very long. The city they stay to themselves, maintaining their loner image, often becoming solos or medics, which isn't too dissimilar, but it's interesting that puts like the Gangrel in almost like on the verge of extinction sort of mentality. Because Night City doesn't exactly know for its green, luscious spaces, and Night City, the area surrounding it is just like desert. Like it's not particularly ideal for them to survive, and so having to, you know, as I said earlier on with the Asites, the hunter has to become the hunted sort of thing. Then we have the Giovanni. This clan still continues to operate from the family stronghold in Venice, reaching out to gain control as much as the wealth they can manage to grab. In the last few decades, they've come in indirect conflict with the Ventrue numerous times, the Camera beginning to see them as a greater danger than ever before as their plan blooms. So there's a bit of unrest there, because you know the Giovanni and the Ventrue of the Camarilla don't exactly interact with each other's politics, but that seems to be breaking down here. Which, the promise of 1528, which is sort of bringing to limelight in the 5th edition setting, it was there in older editions of Vampire. You know, rather than getting too deep in it, it's interesting to see that these two go at it all the same. But that said, there isn't that much different here, and, you know, I would have been interested in a bit more of a conversation about how they deal with ghosts or spirits, as it's you see on the opposite page. Then we have the Malkavians. Members of this clan still congregate where madness and sanity are common. Naturally, this means they could be anywhere in most modern American cities. So yeah, typical legacy Malkavian. I say legacy stuff, but then again, 5th edition doesn't exactly treat the Malkavians with sense, you know. Yeah. The Nosferatu, my personal favourite clan. The Nosferatu remain separated from mortal and kindred society for the most part. Although their information network has expanded to even greater levels, members of this clan are likely to know anything about anyone. Again, same Nosferatu stuff, but the distinction between keeping away from kindred and mortals, I feel, is a little interesting here. You know, and in the days of the internet and network and like corporate wars and things happening online and net running, I imagine the Nosferatu are particularly very good net runners. You know, it'd be interesting to see what they would do with ShrekNet in that scenario, which of course you can explore in your own cyberpunk vampire settings, Vampire the Cyberpunk, or Cybervamp as it were. Then we have the Ravnos. The American members of this clan travel about as nomads, wandering from city to city, trying to find what enjoyment they can in their particular form of unlife. So pretty nothing here. At least it doesn't harpen on too much, and they're more those elements. The Toreador, at least not specifically mentioning cultures and whatnot and being total tits about it. So the Toreador continues to be a powerful influence in the Camarilla. Several influential Toreador own several entertainment corps specialising in every medium available in the world of 2020. Which, Doesn't surprise me. It's interesting that they control corporations a bit more forwardly, or at least as forward as this book's prepared to make it. Now, here's the Tremere. Many of the Tremere have puppets in the middle to upper of several corps, including those controlled by the Venture and Giovanni. The Tremere are all interested in gaining influence in the mortal world, and the balance of power is shifting from the national governments to mega corporations. During the last pilgrimage to Transylvania to meet with the Tremere, it was noticed that he was behaving strangely, which I like that little seed of a plot point. Doesn't mention much to do with blood sorcery here, more the element of control, and it'll be interesting to see how that would change in a cyberpunk setting, like the importance of their thaumaturgy here. And it'll be interesting to see what Tremere would look like in this setting, which again, you can explore in your settings of cyberpunk. The Ventru possess much influence since many of the more powerful shareholders in many corporations are in their pockets. Money, favours, dominate, and blood bonds ensure their status in the human world. Ever wonder why cybernetics are unpopular in Europe? The caitiff. The caitiff, for those who are unaware, are those that are without a clan. Partly a social theme, but more so that there's something gone wrong with the blood-based genetic makeup, so they don't exhibit some of the weaknesses and the things that tie the clans together, so they have different disciplines, like it could be any match, or at least any match that the storyteller allows. They don't have their weaknesses, they don't have their strengths, so to speak. They're the Build-A-Bear vampire option. In a time where individuality is becoming a rare resource, the caitiff have become even more difficult keeping theirs. Many are currently found in gangs or simply trying to survive on their own or in small groups. Quite a few have joined the Anarchs or Sabbat packs in the last few years, so pretty much the same as older stuff, but it's interesting that it focuses a bit more on their lack of individuality, which in sense, them being different from the other clans makes them rather individual. I actually did a roleplay guide on how to portray the caitiff in an interesting way, which you can check out in a card that's going to pop up in the corner there. You probably might not be able to see me point up there, but it's up there somewhere. Anywho, then we have the Inconnu and the Sabbat, which you can read at your own leisure. And then we have other groups like the Magi, the Mummy, Spirits, which I'll just touch upon because I mentioned it a moment ago with the Giovanni. Stories about ghosts haunting mainframes, while not common, are being circulated through the net, which is very interesting to see. Because there is an element of Wraith the Oblivion lore where it is the Artificers Guild with their inhabit, which again I'll leave a lore dive up there. Very interesting stuff, I do have to say, where some of the younger members of the guild are able to using technology to their advantage and possibly traversing through telephone wires and whatnot at really fast speeds, the speed of sound or light, as it were. Speed of sound, the speed of light. That's faster. And it'd be interesting to see how ghosts would interact in this sense, particularly in Wraith the Oblivion terms. Do they come up into how do they interact with viruses? Are they becoming viruses themselves? Very interesting stuff. And how would corporations employ these sorts of things? Because I don't think that they would remain completely incognito, as it were. Then we've got a bit on Vampire Hunters, the Society of Leopold, which you can read about in your own leisure. But then we have the new vampire clan, the Cyberpunks, which I think is such a lazy. Because you play as Cyberpunks in the default game, so whether you're a vampire or not, you are a Cyberpunk or an Edge Runner. So it would have been nice if they gave it a bit more of an interesting name rather than just being called Cyberpunks, but there you go. That is what we've got. But of course, you as the storyteller, if you want to come up with a more interesting name yourself, you go for it. So the Cyberpunks is basically these are a bloodline that have managed to incorporate net running, blood sorcery, and cyberware to control and do all that stuff, I guess. So I like the fact they've included this, but I think it's just a bit sloppy. Technica is their unique discipline that allows them to do this. Technica is the cyberpunk's special relationship with technology. With this power, they can understand machines much more fully, or even with them, an absolute necessity in the modern world. I'll just say now that took me quite a few takes to do, because I think that's a bit sloppily written in of itself, and also the fonts quality isn't particularly fantastic, which is like a main criticism with the PDFs, I have to say. So yeah, you've got 6 levels rather than the usual 5, with level 1 being this ability allows the Kindred to interface with any place of equipment designed for that she can touch sanguineous determinist vehicles, cyberdecks. A touch on the device or on an interface cord is all that is necessary. However, the touch must be maintained if contact is lost or control is lost. And right at the end with level 6, we have the cyberpunk can send her life force into a machine inhabiting it. She has an absolute control over the device. Her body, however, is motionless if in torpor, so essentially a vampiric netrunning sort of thing. And the character will be unaware of what is occurring around her body unless she is near death, or the machine has a sensor that can monitor it. She can only leave the machine to re-enter her body or enter another machine. There are no cyberpunks above 7th generation, which is an interesting note there. So when I say that it's like net running, you may be aware this is Cyberpunk 2020 is obviously a game that was designed in the late 80s and early 90s. So if you think about those classic films like Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, Johnny Matrix, Terminator, Robocop, like that sort of like tech is really important, corporation sort of thing, big and clunky sort of thing. I'm a bit ashamed it's taken me this long into this part to talk about the setting of Cyberpunk itself, but that's what we're doing now, I guess. So it's not all like slim and sleek, like technology is big and bulky and net running and surfing the web had a bit of like enjoyable cheese to it. And with net running, you like plug yourself into the computer. In 2020, you have like a cyberdeck sort of thing that you sort of like hold on to or like have on your person. You chip yourself into that goes into the machine, and your whole like subconsciousness is filled with like the metaverse. Back when the metaverse wasn't just cringe associated with tech bros and money laundering scams and all that shit. So you're able to surf the web, travel across the world as your body remains in place. Torpid, one could say. It's interesting to see how that's all working, and you can go through the different discipline powers if you haven't read these already on the screen and use them properly in your own game. And of course we then have cyberware, and we're just going to focus specifically on that big question on cyberware in kindred bodies. Cyberware will generally be present in those canons who were embraced within the last 15 years. Most people in the modern world have, at the minimum, a pair of interface plugs and a neural-aware processor. Interface plugs allows you to plug in to different machines and whatnot, but for neural-aware processors you can read Cyberpunk 2020 to find out. These guidelines are written with the assumption that the cybernetic implants will work in a vampiric body. If you wish Elder Kindred to be capable of getting cyberware, here is a little ritual we cooked up. Note that this could only be found at the very best of clinics, because it's like Ripper Doc clinic sort of things, and medical clinics is how this is done officially. With such those described in Eurosource, which is a sourcebook for Cyberpunk 2020. A K-Knight with contact level 4 or 5 knows someone who could get into such a clinic. And then you have a ritual that gives you a description about how elders are able to do that, because cyberware doesn't exactly work very well with the undead flesh. So let's go back and talk about the cyberware in itself. Cyberware is what makes the genre different. You don't play Cyberpunk just to shoot people. You play Cyberpunk to shoot people with your smart-chipped Minimami 10 submachine gun and shoot first with your Koresenkov reflex boosts. Meat doesn't cut it on the streets, chumba. If you have the euro, because the currency is euro bucks, buy the toys. It will save you you'll save your worthless butt someday. I can read. Besides, the chrome looks to the cryo. One of the ideas that Vampire the Masquerade and Cyberpunk 2020 have in common is the concept of diminishing humanity. In Vampire, you can lose it in various heinous acts. In Cyberpunk, you lose humanity to cyberware. Humanity due to frenzies, and with Rorschach, with the advent of cyberware and its effect on the psyche, the flame of humanitas burns even lower, the beast edging closer to the surface. Yes, a vampire becomes more powerful than other vampires, let alone solos with these devices, but think of the price. Humanity cost works much as it does in Cyberpunk 2020. The primary difference is that it works against humanity in Cyberphone. Which is what they've called this now, apparently. Both empathy from Cyberpunk and humanity from the Storyteller system are based on the 0 to 10 range. Don't forget to multiply your base humanity by 10 to get your humanity humanity index. If a guru has cyberware, Luna knows why. It would prevent change. Use Gnosis instead. If a mummy, use Barb, and so on and so forth. For those who don't wish to add a 6-sided dice in the Vampire Chronicles, because Cyberpunk uses a D10 and D6, you can determine how many 10-sided dice to roll for the loss by adding the total number of D6s, multiplying by 3 and dividing by 5, keeping the remainder as a plus. Example, Eric has 9d6 loss from cyberware. He multiplies 9 by 3, getting 27, then divides by 5, getting 5, 4, or 5 with a remainder of 2. He rolls 5d10 plus 2 to determine the cost. Do not add fixed cost items into this total, which is an attempt to make the system work properly, yes, but it's a very clunky one. I'm not a fan of it, to be totally honest. That's like the main thing that's making me a bit about it. So yeah, that's just generally how it works, and you'll find later on that vampires generally don't do cyberware post-embrace, as you've kind of gathered from there. Like, you kind of need to be embraced with it and not make those changes. So cyberware and disciplines, and there's a bit here that talks about how that works, which I think is a very interesting thing. Fortitude and potence, vampires in the net, starting cyberware. Starting cyberware, talks about the resources, like the conversion over there. The cyberware list, if a piece of cyberware is not mentioned, assume no change from Cyberpunk. Most of the cyberware from Cyberpunk 2020, Interface Magazine, Chrome 1 and Chromebook are listed here. You can actually buy the Chromebooks as a bundle now, as both as PDF and print on demand on Drive-Thru-RPG. Again, link in the description below. So you can buy them as one book. I'm actually going to leave quite a few Cyberpunk books for you to go and check things out. Again, using those special affiliate links so I get some of the money back. You've got some implants and some conversions, like Krezenkov Fashion Wear gives you a +1 celerity level, 1 dexterity at level 2, +3 celerity speed wear. I'm not going to go through each one bit by bit, but it gives you the idea of how to convert, those staple cyberpunk themes into Vampire the Masquerade, which we will be doing in that third and final installment. We do a little bit of combat. I'm not entirely too sure what TN means here. I'm assuming that's technology, but I can work that out at a later point. So basically, that's the remainder of the home. I'm calling it homebrew, but it's not. It gives you a general list of cyberware, limbs, and whatnot, and how that does. Like cyberarm, 4 damage boxes, 4 soak dice. Where some of my favourite weapons, cyber weapons. Here we go. We've got the Wolvers. Damage does strength +3. So pretty meaty stuff. Some of these have got asterisks next to them. If a Kindred had this before the embrace, it no longer works. If a Kindred possesses this, he is considered to have a normal heartbeat. A Kindred with this only needs to be staked through 1 pump, which I'm presuming 1,000 bits and pieces and whatnot. And that's the first part of our Cybervamp 3-part series, where we had a look at the general setting of the Cyberpunk and Vampire the Masquerade crossover, the world of future darkness, or Cyberfang as they call it. But I think Cybervamp is better, but then again, I am biased. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that was interesting for you, and at the very least has sparked your curiosity of answering finally that question: how does Cyberpunk and Vampire the Masquerade truly cross over? What can you do with this setting? Well, there are the rules for you now. Well, then again, they've been sitting around for the last 30 odd years now, so go have it and chip in. And I'm really interested to see what people make of this now that I've sort of brought this into the limelight a bit more. And if you have done this, I would actually love to hear what you make of it in the comments below. Whether you were Cyberpunk players that wanted to bring in Vampire the Masquerade, or you're a Vampire group that wanted to bring in some Cyberpunk elements. I'm really interested to see what people make of this. And, if you've been following me for a little bit of time, I've been getting into Cyberpunk. That shelf up there is slowly filling up with Cyberpunk books. And I'd love to do like more crossover stuff like this and eventually talk about Cyberpunk proper, whether it be on this channel or a separate one, although I feel it will be a separate one. But regardless of what that happens, I would need some support for that. So check out the various books in the description below. Purchase them with those affiliate links, both Cyberpunk and World of Darkness. I get some of the money back when there's an affiliate link. I've already said this before. Like, subscribe, and just tell me how much that you're enjoying this so I can continue to basically experiment a bit more with the channel and provide some very interesting content for you, all things horror and TTRPG related. Specifically, horror TTRPG related. So next time, Tombs, farewell.